Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here, well, it's straightforward. Take this mountain of complex global info, the stuff that would take you ages to sift through, and really boil it down to what you need to know.
And today, that mountain is particularly focused. We're looking squarely at India, but through a global lens. We've got sources covering top-level diplomacy, huge economic news, and some really tough domestic challenges.
It's a massive stack. We're talking insights from interactions with figures like Mike Pompeo, all the way to, the hard numbers on iPhone exports, and then down to some very difficult human stories, like the Indian national caught up in the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Exactly. The sheer range here really
Wow.
tells a story in itself about India's centrality right now. It's acting as this pivot point for so many global currents.
So our plan is to unpack these 9 key headlines, one by one. We'll treat each like its own segment, digging into the specific facts and figures provided in the source material. We want to make sure you get the full picture: geopolitics, economy, social issues.
Right. Let's dive in, starting at the highest level.
Mm.
Diplomatic partnerships.
Okay, first up, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with a delegation from the Hudson Institute. This happened in New Delhi.
And this wasn't just any delegation. You've got some very prominent names here.
Yeah, like former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, and the Hudson Institute's president, John P. Walters.
That lineup is significant. The Hudson Institute, it's a very influential conservative think tank in the U.S. Having figures like Pompeo and O'Brien involved signals this is more than just a courtesy call. It's about strategic signaling, maybe laying groundwork for future policy, thinking back in Washington.
So what was actually on the table? The focus was clearly on the India-U.S. strategic relationship.
Absolutely. They talked defense cooperation, tech collaboration,
Yeah.
and global stability. That's the broad framework.
And Modi apparently really emphasized the shared democratic values, the common ground there, alongside the strategic interests.
He did. He specifically highlighted working together on critical technologies, think AI, quantum, semiconductors, that sort of thing, plus defense, and building economic resilience, especially in supply chains.
Which ties into the bigger picture they discussed, right? The challenges out there.
Yeah, exactly. Things like dealing with authoritarian regimes, that's obviously a big one for the U.S., fixing supply chain vulnerabilities, and managing regional security threats, particularly in the Indo-Pacific.
Modi reiterated India's vision for a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. That aligns pretty directly with U.S. goals in the region.
It does. And the Hudson delegation, they didn't just listen. They offered some quite public praise for India's leadership.
Specifically mentioning the G20 presidency.
Yes, they pointed to India's handling of the G20, focusing on how India pushed for inclusive growth, climate action, digital transformation. They framed it as India acting like a responsible global leader.
That sounds like a pretty strong endorsement.
It is. And crucially, they acknowledged India's potential as a counterweight to, well, rising authoritarianism and its role in strengthening democratic institutions globally. That narrative, India as this democratic anchor, that's a key takeaway they'll be promoting in U.S. policy circles.
Okay, let's zoom in on the defense aspect. These talks always involve military-to-military stuff. What specifics came up?
Well, there's
Okay, let's shift from the U.S. to the U.K. Our second headline points to a bit of a contradiction, doesn't it? UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer visiting India to push a new trade deal, but at the same time taking a really firm line on visas.
Yeah, it's a classic example of domestic politics kind of bumping up against international economic goals. Starmer brought this huge delegation, over 100 people, entrepreneurs, university heads, cultural figures, all geared towards boosting the trade relationship.
But on visas for Indian workers or students, he drew a hard line.
A very hard line. He stated Britain will not be relaxing visa rules. For his Labour government back home, showing they're tough on immigration, committed to reducing numbers, that's a core political message, even if it creates some awkwardness during a major trade promotion trip.
He seemed to frame the visit purely around investment, boosting UK exports, creating jobs in the UK.
That was the explicit focus. Now, the trade deal itself, it was finalized back in July after some pretty long negotiations.
And the potential benefits are significant.
They're expected to be, yeah. Multi-billion-pound boost for both sides. For the UK, think cheaper exports like cars, Scotch whiskey, machinery heading to India. For India, better access to the UK market for things like textiles, jewelry, maybe some agricultural products. That's the economic logic driving it.
But on the visa front, was there any concession at all? Or just a flat no?
There was one very specific, very limited thing, a 3-year exemption from Social Security payments for Indian workers on short-term UK assignments.
But they were quick to clarify that doesn't mean broader changes, right?
Immediately.
Yeah.
Ministers stressed this wasn't a signal of a wider shift. And remember, this trip came shortly after the Labor government had actually announced stricter settlement policies and reiterated its goal to cut overall immigration.
So Starmer stuck to his guns, no special visa deals for India, even with the U.S. making changes to its H-1B program.
Correct. He maintained the UK wants top talent globally, but no specific expansion for India was planned. It's a balancing act, promote trade, but hold the line on immigration control.
Still, the visit did seem to boost actual connectivity.
Oh, for sure. You saw British Airways announce a third daily flight between Delhi and Heathrow. Manchester Airport unveiled a new direct route to Delhi. These are concrete business decisions showing confidence in that trade corridor despite the visa stance.
Now, there was also a subtle diplomatic moment during the trip related to Russia.
Yes, Starmer used the opportunity to kind of distance himself from Prime Minister Modi's public birthday greetings to Vladimir Putin.
Which, from a UK perspective, is probably necessary.
Absolutely. India maintains its own relationship with Russia, often described as pragmatic. But the UK is, one of Russia's strongest critics, especially post-Ukraine. Starmer noted he hadn't sent and wouldn't send similar greetings.
And he shifted the focus to something else regarding Russia.
He did. He brought up the UK's major concern about Russia's shadow fleet of oil tankers.
Right. Explain that for listeners who might not be familiar. What is the shadow fleet?
So this is basically a network of older tankers, often with murky ownership, questionable insurance, operating outside the normal international maritime regulations. They're used to transport Russian oil, bypassing Western sanctions and price caps.
And the UK is concerned?
It's twofold. First, it undermines sanctions. Second, these ships pose a huge environmental and safety risk, especially sailing through busy waters like the English Channel. They're often poorly maintained, lack proper insurance. So by raising this, Starmer highlights a shared interest with India maritime security, upholding regulations while subtly pivoting away from the awkwardness of India buying Russian oil. The UK is leading efforts to crack down on this fleet.
Okay, headline number 3 takes us across the Atlantic again, but this time to Canada and the U.S.-Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney praising former U.S. President Donald Trump. That feels unusual.
It's definitely noteworthy. Carney reportedly called Trump a transformative president during bilateral talks at the White House.
And the specific praise, it wasn't just generalities.
No, Carney specifically credited Trump with helping to ease tensions between India and Pakistan. He also mentioned other regions like Azerbaijan and Armenia and referenced Trump's broader influence, curbing Iran, pushing NATO allies on defense spending, shaking up the economic order.
Trump, of course, ran with that, right? Saying his trade leverage helped.
Yes, Trump reiterated his own claim that the threat of economic consequences, basically trade pressure, was what motivated both India and Pakistan to de-escalate and avoid conflict, to protect their economic relationship with the U.S.
But this is where the narrative gets complicated. We have conflicting accounts.
We do. And it comes from a pretty authoritative source, former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton. He flatly called Trump's claims about his role in the India-Pakistan de-escalation inappropriate.
And Bolton offered a different explanation for the ceasefire?
He did. Bolton stated very clearly that the ceasefire that largely held was actually reached through direct military-to-military talks between the Directors General of Military Operations, the DGMOs of India and Pakistan.
Why is that distinction, DGMO talks versus presidential intervention, so important?
Because the DGMO channel is the established professional military line of communication. When they agree on something like a ceasefire, it means the operational commands on both sides are committed. It's seen as a more reliable, less political mechanism for de-escalation on the ground. Bolton's point is that the ceasefire happened because the militaries themselves decided it was necessary, likely through their own direct dialogue in 2021, not because of Trump's trade threats.
So it suggests the de-escalation was more of a sovereign military decision between India and Pakistan.
That's Bolton's clear implication. He essentially argues the credit Trump claims isn't warranted by the facts of how the ceasefire mechanism actually worked.
And Bolton didn't just stop at questioning the India-Pakistan claim, did he?
No. He also criticized what he saw as Trump's erratic policy towards India more broadly. He brought up the example of imposing tariffs on India for buying Russian oil, while supposedly overlooking similar purchases by other U.S. allies. This, for Bolton, highlighted inconsistency and undermined the idea of a coherent strategy.
So Carney's praise for Trump, how do we interpret that then?
It likely reflects a diplomatic calculation.
Huh?
Carney might be aiming to reinforce North American unity, acknowledge the reality of U.S. influence under Trump, maybe smooth relations. But the factual basis for the specific India-Pakistan claim, according to Bolton at least, is pretty shaky. It seems the actual de-escalation happens through different channels.
All right, let's shift gears into the economy and technology. And we start with a really eye-popping number. India setting a new record for iPhone exports.
Yeah, this one is huge. The headline figure, India exported $10 billion worth of iPhones in the fiscal year 2024-25. That's unprecedented.
And the growth is just staggering. It doubled, right, from $5 billion a year before.
It's exactly doubled in just 1 year. It's probably the clearest indicator yet of Apple's big strategy shift, diversifying its manufacturing away from China.
Driven by geopolitics, supply chain worries.
All of that. Geopolitical tensions between the U.S. and China, the lessons learned from pandemic supply shocks. Apple is deliberately moving significant production, and India is emerging as a major beneficiary. That $10 billion number proves it's happening at scale and fast.
Who's actually making these iPhones in India? We're talking about the big contract manufacturers.
Right. It's primarily Foxconn, Wistron, which is now part of the Tata Group, and Pegatron. Those three are the key players.
And the volume increase is massive, too.
It is. They shipped nearly 12 million iPhones from India in FY25. That's up from about 7.5 million the year before. Huge jump.
Where are these India-made iPhones going?
Mostly Europe and the Middle East, but also increasingly to markets in Southeast Asia and Africa. It really positions India as a global export hub for these high-end electronics.
Now, we have to talk about the role of Indian government policy here. The Production-Linked Incentive Scheme, the PLI scheme. How critical was that?
Oh, absolutely critical. You likely wouldn't see numbers like this without the PLI scheme. It's designed specifically to attract large-scale manufacturing and make India competitive.
Can you break down how it works for the listener? What does PLI actually do?
Sure. Essentially, the government offers financial incentives, basically cash back to companies based on their incremental sales of goods manufactured in India. So the more you increase your production and sales above a baseline year, the bigger the incentive you get, usually calculated as a percentage of those increased sales.
And there are conditions, right? Companies have to invest.
Yes, they have to meet specific targets for investment and production levels over several years to qualify. It's performance-based. For electronics manufacturing, like iPhones, it makes setting up large-scale operations in India financially much more attractive, helping offset costs compared to other regions. This $10 billion record is, in many ways, a validation of that policy approach.
So putting this $10 billion into global context, what share of global iPhone production does India now hold?
It's estimated to be around 7% now, which is a massive leap. Just a few years ago, it was less than 1%.
That's a significant shift.
It really is. It shows India is moving beyond just basic assembly and becoming integrated into the complex, high-value end of tech manufacturing. The impact goes beyond just export numbers, too. Think foreign investment flowing in, technology transfer happening, and tens of thousands of jobs being created, particularly in states like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, where these factories are concentrated. It's a turning point, positioning India as a serious player in high-end tech manufacturing globally.
Sticking with tech, our next headline involves Anthropic, the AI startup. They're expanding big time in India.
Yeah, this is another major development. Anthropic, based in San Francisco, known for its AI model, Claude. They're valued at something like $183 billion after a massive funding round, and they see India as strategically vital.
India is already their second largest market for Claude usage.
That's right. Behind the U.S., India is number 2. So there's already significant adoption happening.
And the expansion plans are concrete.
Very concrete. They're opening an office in Bengaluru next year, building a local team. And the key focus, the really interesting part, is tailoring AI for India's linguistic diversity.
Enhancing Claude's abilities in Indic languages.
Exactly. They're targeting performance improvements in nearly a dozen languages. Hindi, Bengali, Marathi, Telugu, Tamil, Punjabi, Gujarati, Kannada, Malayalam, Urdu. That's a huge undertaking.
And they're prioritizing Hindi for government and business use.
Yes, the goal is to roll out better Hindi capabilities first, specifically for government services and enterprise interfaces to really drive adoption in those key sectors across the country.
This move seems very aligned with India's own tech ambitions.
It does. Anthropic isn't just setting up shop. They're talking about partnerships, collaborating with Indian conglomerates, healthcare providers, schools, startup accelerators, trying to build locally relevant AI solutions.
And the source mentions sovereign AI. That sounds important. What does that mean in this context?
Sovereign AI is this idea that a nation should have control over its own AI infrastructure and data. For India, it means ensuring critical data stays within India. AI models are trained on data that reflects Indian culture and context, and crucially, that the Indian government has regulatory oversight over how these powerful AI systems are used.
So Anthropic is exploring helping India build these capabilities.
That's what the source suggests, exploring partnerships to help India develop these sovereign AI capabilities within India's own regulatory framework. This aligns perfectly with India's goals for technological self-reliance, national security, and setting its own ethical standards for AI governance, rather than just importing standards from elsewhere.
Okay, let's bring it back to the market reality, though. India is the second largest market, but how does the usage actually compare to the US?
There's still a big gap. India's share of Claude usage is reported at 7.2%. The US is at 21.6%. Other countries like Brazil, Japan, South Korea are around 3.7% each.
So the expansion is really about future potential.
Absolutely. It's about tapping into India's huge pool of engineering talent, addressing the massive market need for multilingual AI, and positioning themselves for future growth. And they're not alone. Rivals like OpenAI, Perplexity, they're also expanding in India. It confirms India is becoming this critical battleground and innovation hub for the next generation of AI that's multilingual, responsible, and can operate at scale.
Okay, our third economic point brings us back to the intersection of finance and geopolitics. India settling payments for Russian oil using Chinese yuan.
Yeah, this is a really significant development, showing how financial systems are adapting under pressure. The core fact is, Indian refiners have started using yuan to pay for Russian crude.
And the driver is sanctions pressure, making dollar transactions difficult.
Precisely. Western sanctions on Russia, especially on its financial institutions, have made using U.S. dollars for these transactions increasingly risky and complex from a compliance perspective. So refiners are looking for alternatives.
It's mainly private refiners doing this.
That's the key distinction mentioned. Private Indian refiners seem to be leading the charge, often working with Chinese banks, which face fewer restrictions from Western governments when dealing with Russian entities compared to, say, European or American banks.
Do we have a sense of the scale? How much oil is being paid for in yuan?
The source gives a specific snapshot. Between June and July 2025, Indian refiners reportedly paid in yuan for at least 16 million barrels of Russian oil. That's a substantial volume in just a 2-month period. It shows the yuan is becoming a practical, working alternative payment channel.
And this obviously has wider implications for the global financial system.
Huge implications. It feeds directly into the debate about the erosion of the U.S. dollar's dominance in global trade, particularly in energy markets.
What does erosion of dollar dominance mean in practice here?
Well, every time a major transaction like this happens outside the dollar system, it slightly weakens the dollar's centrality. It means the U.S. has less visibility and less direct leverage over these flows through its financial system. It reduces global demand for dollars, and by extension, for U.S. Treasury bonds, which are used to hold dollar reserves. Policymakers in the West are definitely watching this closely.
Because it strengthens alternative systems.
Exactly. It boosts the international role of the yuan, even if incrementally, and it highlights the growing financial and strategic alignment between Russia and China, as they both seek ways to operate outside the reach of Western sanctions.
But from India's perspective, this is primarily about energy security, isn't it? Getting access to discounted oil.
That seems to be the main driver. It's pragmatic. Russian oil has often been available at significant discounts since the sanctions kicked in. Using the yuan provides a workable payment mechanism for Indian refiners to access these cheaper supplies, navigating the complex sanctions environment while securing energy affordably. It's about India's national interest.
Has the Indian government officially endorsed this?
No, the sources clarify that the government hasn't given an official nod to using yuan. And public sector refiners, which are subject to stricter compliance and political oversight, apparently still face more challenges finding reliable non-dollar payment routes.
So it's more of a market-driven adaptation by private players?
It appears so, yes. But it definitely fits into that broader global trend you hear about de-dollarization, where countries are actively exploring and using alternatives to the U.S. dollar for international trade and reserves. This is a concrete example of that trend in action.
Okay, let's turn our focus inward now to domestic issues within India. First up, the Bihar Assembly elections. Seat-sharing talks seem to be causing major headaches for both main alliances.
Yes, the elections for Bihar's 243-member assembly have been announced, happening in 2 phases. And as is often the case in Bihar's complex political landscape, stitching together the coalitions is proving challenging.
Let's break down the alliances. First, the ruling NDA, the National Democratic Alliance.
Right. That includes the BJP, Nitish Kumar's JDU, Chirag Paswan's LJP, Ramvilas faction, and Jitan Ram Manji's Hindustani Awam Morcha. Their main goal is just projecting unity and holding the coalition together smoothly.
Then you have the opposition NDA bloc. Who's in that grouping?
It's a more diverse mix. You've got the RJD, Congress, and then the left parties, CPI, CPIM, and crucially CPIML, plus the Vikashil Insayan Party, or VIP.
And the main friction point right now seems to be within that NDA bloc, specifically involving the CPIML.
That's right. The Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist Liberation, the CPIML, is reportedly digging in its heels. They've rejected an offer from the RJD of 19 seats.
Which is the same number they contested in 2020.
Correct. But they feel they deserve more now. Their initial demand was apparently much higher, around 45 seats. They've supposedly revised that down, but are insisting on 30 specific constituencies that they consider non-negotiable.
What's their justification for demanding such a significant increase?
It's based on their recent performance. In 2020, they contested 19 seats and won 12 of them. That's a really strong strike rate. And in the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, they contested 3 seats within Bihar and won 2.
So they feel they've proven their electoral strength and deserve more recognition?
Exactly. Their leadership feels the 19-seat offer doesn't reflect their grassroots support or their recent successes. It's about political weight and, respect within the alliance.
How does this specific fight impact the broader coalition dynamics, especially considering Bihar's caste politics?
Well, the CPIML has a significant base among certain marginalized communities and landless groups. If they feel slighted and decide to go it alone or contest more seats independently, they could split the anti-NDA vote in key constituencies, particularly in rural areas where they're strong. That's the leverage they hold.
Yeah.
It could seriously damage the NDA bloc's chances if not resolved.
Are other smaller parties in the bloc also making demands?
Yes. The CPI is also asking for a reasonable number of seats. And the VIP leader, Mukesh Sahani, is expressing confidence about getting a good number. Plus, there's talk of potentially bringing in other parties like the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha or the Rashtriya Lok Janshakti Party, which just adds more layers of complexity to the seat distribution.
So both alliances are really grappling with keeping their partners happy while trying to form a winning combination.
It's the perennial challenge of coalition politics in a state like Bihar. Everything hinges on managing these internal equations, balancing caste considerations, past results, partner ambitions. How successfully they navigate these frictions in the coming days will be critical. A messy seat-sharing process can really hurt morale and perception right before polling.
Okay, shifting to a very different kind of challenge, now a social issue with digital dimensions. There's been a reported surge in anti-Indian racism on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter.
Yes, and the numbers reported are quite alarming. An analysis by NRI Affairs found over 680 posts targeting Indian communities on X generated more than 281 million views.
And that's just in a 3-month period, June to August 2025.
Correct. Just 3 months. That sheer volume of visibility for racist content is deeply concerning. It suggests a normalization of this kind of rhetoric online.
The report links this surge to anti-immigration sentiment, particularly in Australia.
It does. It suggests the rise coincides with heightened political discourse there, where migrants, including Indians, are being scapegoated for broader societal issues like housing shortages or strained infrastructure.
And there's specific misinformation being spread.
Yes, things like false claims that Indian migration is outpacing historical European migration waves. The source quoted a flyer sentiment saying something like, more Indians in 5 years than Greeks and Italians in 100.
Which has drawn condemnation.
Strong condemnation. Australia's Race Discrimination Commissioner, Giri Sivaraman, who is himself of Indian origin, called these claims terrible and unacceptable. He pointed out the underlying prejudice.
He also placed it in a historical context, didn't he?
He did. He warned that this kind of targeting isn't new. Racism in Australia has historically hit successive waves of migrants, Italians, Greeks, Vietnamese, and now, it seems, Indians are increasingly in the crosshairs. This suggests it's a deeper structural problem, not just about one group.
And platforms like X play a role in amplifying this.
A huge role. The speed and reach of social media can rapidly spread hateful content. It contributes to normalizing casual racism, stereotyping, mockery, which has real-world consequences.
Particularly the mental health impact.
Absolutely. especially for younger generations like Indian Australians. Constantly encountering this kind of hostility online can lead to serious anxiety, depression, and feelings of alienation. The report even mentioned a truly vile example.
After the Air India tragedy.
Yes, seeing comments like "less Indians is a good thing" circulated online after such a tragedy just shows the depth of the bigotry some people feel comfortable expressing publicly now.
What's the response been from community groups?
There are calls to treat racism more seriously, almost like a public health crisis that requires a systemic response. And demands for social media platforms to take more responsibility for the content they host and amplify. You're also seeing counter-rallies and solidarity movements emerging in response.
A deeply troubling situation. Our final headline brings us back to the human impact of geopolitical conflict. The reported capture of an Indian national who was fighting for the Russian army in Ukraine.
Yes, this is a very difficult and sensitive case. Ukrainian media reported that a 22-year-old Indian national, identified as Majodi Sahil Mohammed from Morbi in Gujarat, was captured.
Allegedly serving with the Russian military.
That's the allegation. He was reportedly detained by Ukraine's 63rd Mechanized Brigade after surrendering during combat operations.
And his story involves claims of coercion.
It does. According to the reports, Majodi stated he joined the Russian military essentially to get out of potential prison time in Russia. He said he was facing a possible 7-year sentence for drug-related charges. There he had initially gone to Russia to study.
So, joining the army was presented as an alternative to prison.
That's his claim. It raises serious ethical questions about recruitment practices, potentially exploiting vulnerable foreign nationals facing legal trouble.
He also claimed promises were broken.
Yes, he said he was promised his freedom and significant financial compensation. The figures mentioned were between 100,000 and 1.5 million rubles, which is roughly $1,200 to $18,000. But he claims he never received the money and wasn't treated humanely.
And his plea upon capture was quite stark.
Very stark. He was quoted saying, "I didn't want to fight." He asked for help and specifically said he'd rather stay in Ukraine or return to India than go back to Russia, describing Russia as a place lacking truth and justice. It paints a picture of someone feeling trapped and desperate.
What's the Indian government's position on this specific case?
Officially, they haven't confirmed his detention yet. They're verifying the reports, and apparently the Indian mission in Kyiv hasn't received formal notification from Ukrainian authorities as of the time of the source report.
But this isn't the first time India has dealt with its citizens ending up in the Russian military.
No, unfortunately not. The Ministry of External Affairs, MEA, had previously issued warnings, cautioning Indian citizens against being lured into joining the Russian army, often through recruitment agencies making false promises.
Do we know how many Indians might still be serving?
The MEA stated back in September that they were aware of 27 Indian nationals still serving in the Russian army at that time. They confirmed the issue has been raised strongly with Russian authorities, both in Moscow and New Delhi, seeking their early discharge.
So this case highlights a broader vulnerability.
It really does. It underscores the dangers faced by foreign nationals in conflict zones, particularly those who might be recruited under duress or through deception, perhaps promised jobs or debt relief, only to find themselves forced onto the front lines. It's a serious humanitarian and diplomatic concern. #outro.
We've covered a huge amount of ground today. Really, a whirlwind tour touching on India's role across geopolitics, the economy, and pressing domestic issues.
Yeah, from that massive $10 billion iPhone export number, which speaks volumes about manufacturing shifts, to the complexities of using yuan for oil payments, which signals changes in global finance.
Right down to the nitty-gritty of coalition politics in Bihar, and the deeply concerning issues of online racism and the exploitation of individuals caught in conflict zones.
And what's really striking, if you step back, is how interconnected these seemingly disparate headlines are. The strategic talks with the U.S., the AI investments by companies like Anthropic, the energy deals with Russia via China, the domestic political maneuvering, it all feeds into this picture of India navigating a very complex global landscape.
Balancing different relationships, different priorities.
Exactly. Which leads us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. Okay, so we see India making pragmatic moves, like using yuan for Russian oil. It secures energy, yes, but it also, perhaps unintentionally, bolsters financial systems that rival the West's. At the same time, you have major Western tech players, like Anthropic, deepening their investment in India, focusing on things like sovereign AI, which seems to align India more closely with Western tech ecosystems and values.
No.
So the question is,
How does India continue to walk this tightrope? How does it balance the immediate need for pragmatic solutions, like securing affordable energy, even if it means using yuan with its longer-term strategic goals, which seem increasingly aligned with democratic partners and a rules-based international order, particularly in technology and defense? Watching how India manages that fundamental tension, which we've seen reflected in almost all of today's headlines, that's going to be key to understanding its trajectory in the coming years.
A really crucial balancing act to watch. That's definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.